Welcome to the show today. My name is Douglas Gabriel. I'm here with John Barnwell, and we're discussing a series of books that we're putting out with the help of our producer, Tyler Gabriel, called From the Works of Rudolf Steiner. And today's topic is developing Christ in our threefold ego. And as I made a joke earlier, today, what does it, threefold ego? You mean threefold egos? Well, why don't you say egos instead of ego? How could there be three of them and you don't put an S at the end? That's part of the mystery. So, welcome to the show today, John.
Well, hello, Douglas, and it's always happy to see you here. And yes, this series is really turning out to be a wonderful experience for me. And so, by extension, I'm getting a lot of really good feedback from people, both beginners and people that have been at this study for a long time. So, it seems to be accomplishing what we set out to do, and that's to bring clarity. And as the Dalai Lama once said to you and I and a couple other friends when we first met him in Ann Arbor, when he first came to America, he said, more important than being smart, being clear.
It's hard to be clear on these incredibly deep, profound, unfolding mysteries. And so, as we discuss the ego, on the third page of this book, we have to define the three higher egos. But as we have said before, there are numerous egos, and the ego is invisible, it's supersensible, it's everywhere and it's nowhere. You can't find a spot that it ever is for more than a moment of consciousness, because where your consciousness goes, energy flows, as they say in the East. And so if you can focus your consciousness on thinking like an angel, guess what? You can think like an angel. You can communicate with an angel. You can learn the language of the angels, and then you can have direct communion a little bit earlier than all of humanity will rise up to the realm of the angels. And Rudolf Steiner calls that moral imagination, or stage one in initiation. And remember, Rudolf Steiner says there are three stages: preparation, enlightenment, and initiation. So just because you become enlightened like Buddha did, and you go to the first realm of what is called in anthroposophy spirit self, in the East that's called nirvana. Just because you go to nirvana does not mean that you've ascended to the highest realm. Beyond nirvana is paranirvana, and beyond that is mahaparanirvana, or what Rudolf Steiner would call the three egos, spiritual egos, which can be found in the spirit self, life spirit, and spirit human. So when we're talking about this, it is so profound that I didn't even know where to begin with this, except to say that we have to give a cosmic biography of the I am of Christ, because that's the template that we're all following, before we can understand what the human being is going to develop in relationship to that template that we're trying to model. And there are so many aspects to this that it is the central question. And so people who study anthroposophy, if they ever tell you that they're not Christian, then they just study it intellectually. They aren't living it, because you cannot study anthroposophy without embracing Steiner's cosmology, which is inherently a Christian cosmology. And it describes everything in our solar system that we can understand as human beings, and then goes beyond that into the realm of the celestial spheres, and reminds us that we are stardust. We are made of the elements that are raying in from the stars, but not until our solar heliosphere filters it, steps it down, and then it brings it into the realm of the sun, and then the sun brings it to the earth, and then our atmosphere also has to step down the warmth, the light, the sound, and the life from the sun. We can't even accept the rays of the sun that are the most powerful at this point. But when we evolve in the future to that, then we will actually literally be able to take all of our nourishment directly from the sun, where our true ego, our highest of the three egos, spiritual egos, actually still resides. And once that's mentioned, that then opens up 1,000 questions. But it explains why at the end of this book, Developing Christ in Our Threefold Ego, that we put in Steiner's remarks about the beings from Venus, Vulcan, Mercury, and Vulcan that are coming to meet humanity as their ego now is opening up enough to receive angelic, archangelic, and time spirit or archai information and language at this point. And he says that these beings are all around. They're trying to help us all the time. And yet humans are so caught up in their lower ego that is bound by sense perception, bound by their lower desires in the chakras below the heart, that they can't even listen. They can't open themselves up enough to receive these incredible gifts of these superhuman beings who are coming to educate humanity. And it gives us the very clear picture that no matter what, the ever present help of the spiritual world is there to help us take the next step. And we don't need a master being, the master's in us. We don't need an angel to come and manifest to us. Angels are manifesting all the time in moral imagination for those who can rise up to that realm. So we are talking about communion with the divine and the vessel, the ego, the I am, the self that can open itself like the chalice of the Holy Grail to start to receive this type of communication.
Yes, it's been described as ambrosia, that it's this divine sustenance. And so in coming into relationship with these types of ideas, it can be quite clarifying at the same time that it's heartwarming. And you know you're on the right path when you're starting to come to that experience to where you feel as if your heart is glowing, and that and you have a certain sensitivity to where you can feel and perceive that there's wisdom in the sunlight, that it's an actual manifestation of higher worlds in which you're being embraced. And mind you, that the Rudolf Steiner indicates that just as the sun passes the sunlight out, it goes out to the orbit of the planet Saturn, and then returns. There's the solar wind that is that circulation of our solar system, and that we're inside of that. So we are actually literally and actually within the realm of the sun. And by awakening to that realm, we are awakening to the realm of the archangels and the realm of cosmic feeling. And it's that realm of cosmic feeling that can be used as kind of a compass to be able to guide you, because you think up things with your mind, right? But then you end up making your decision when you reflect them on the heart. And it's, if you're following your conscience, then you'll know. If not, if you've fallen below the heart, then you go into the realm of the kidneys, and it becomes a cold process. It becomes the warring factions between the cold process of the kidney or the fiery liver processes, and this whole struggle. And that's that realm of doubt that's pointed at by Wolfram von Eschenbach, and he calls that the dumb fight, that the dumbhead, really, kind of a realm that you're down there and you're stuck in this world of dualism, and that there's this whole struggle between good and evil. And really the struggle in good and between good and evil is the struggle between the hot and cold. And but it's not a dualism, really. It's a threefold activity, and that the this Christ force, this ego, or I am, that's the equilibrating force. That's the force that brings about harmony. And that is the expression of beauty in the world. And that's how you'll know that you're on the right path, where you can always find a semblance of beauty in the world. And there's the old Persian tale about Christ walking with the apostles, and they come across the corpse of a dog on the side of the road, and the apostles are showing feelings of disgust, but Christ, he kneels down and he points and he says, but look at how beautiful his teeth are.
Yes, the inexplicable and the unutterable and the ineffable I am is something that is at the heart of every single religion. In ancient Hebrew times in the Old Testament, it was the I am that I am that I am. You know, that the fact that you can acknowledge that you exist. It's kind of like the philosophical existential question, where they can debate all day long and nobody can explain what I am is, what am is, what be is, what becoming is. That is the whole nature of the mystery of the human being growing into a cosmic being. So in the ancient times, the Hebrews didn't use the name of God. They just used some letters that represented the name of God, or they would use the tetragrammaton.
Tetragrammaton.
Thank you
But
very much.
yes, they would, rather than saying the holy, one of the holy names of God, they would say the Hashem, and so it's a designation of the God, but out of respect, just as in the Rosicrucians, where they have ex Deo nascimur, in Christo morimur, per spiritum sanctum revivissimus. Rudolf Steiner indicates that the Rosicrucians, the middle verse, in Christo morimur, they would leave out the Christo, the Christ word, out of respect.
Yes, and the ultimate God was Yahweh, but they didn't actually spell that out. The moon god was Jehovah, and they had different names for these things. For instance, Moses, looking at the burning bush, I am that I am, which is what is the burning bush? The burning bush is he was basically seeing the God in himself. And it also then later spoke to him in a small, still voice. So it can appear as a rushing wind or as a burning bush, as you can hear it as a rushing wind, as a small, quiet voice, as the voice of conscience that will tell you if you are doing something wrong. But in the future, as we develop our higher egos, that conscience will not only tell us what we're doing wrong after we've done it, it will give us advice beforehand. And basically, what is this? This is your higher consciousness. Well, what is consciousness? Consciousness is a gift of higher beings that we are growing into their likeness. As the Genesis says, we are in the likeness of God, the image and likeness of God. And that's who we are. But to become that is going to take a long time. So it's the Gradalis path of the Grail, the slow, gradual path from dullness to blessedness, as John has just mentioned. So that is why all these analogies about whether you transform into a warrior of Christ, or whether you're a Grail warrior, or a seeker of the Grail, or an Arthurian knight seeking the Grail, they're all seeking their higher self. Now, we can delineate all three higher selves, but when it comes down to it, we can barely even imagine the first higher self. And our lower selves, we can understand that. But what we forget is that your I am is the greatest treasure that you have. Rudolf Steiner referred to a place in the heart where there's a treasure box or a cask. And inside of that is the karma that you have placed there from life to life. In other words, your memories, which make you who you are. So though we came from a group soul consciousness, we will then now go to a spiritual group soul consciousness in the future. The Elohim, the exousiai, or the beings of form, in the second rank of the spiritual hierarchy, which is ruled by the second logos of the Trinity, or the Christ, gives us our ego. To begin with, it was a group ego. And now, as we evolve, it's going to become an individualized group ego that is, as you can imagine, has all the distinctiveness of every single person, their memories, their personality, all that they have had to go through on the path to attain their higher consciousness so they could become a co-creator, will all be added to that, what is called world ego or Christ and group ego of the future. And then there's even higher realms than that. But as we try to work with these things, Rudolf Steiner will describe in infinite detail what you have to do on the path of spiritual development. and it's not so pleasant. We've done talks before, and we put out books, and we're putting out another one soon that is about the dweller in the threshold. We've talked about the dweller in the threshold many times. That's who you have to cross to get into the spiritual world. If you want to get to your higher self, you can't take anything from the sense-bound world with it. You can't take your lower ego. You can't take your attachment to the physical body. You can't even take what you see to be the memories, that the way that you look at them. You can't even take those with you. You have to take only the eternal spiritual core of those memories with you. And you certainly can't take your unresolved, astral body desires. They are not allowed into the spiritual world. So as we're talking about this, it does happen. When can you see an angel working through somebody's moral imagination? Well, there's certain characteristics that appear. The first thing is that when you enter into the spiritual world, whether it's like John says he went to the third heaven, other references to the seventh heaven, there are different levels you can go to. Mostly, they are unconscious when you're asleep, or even in a trance consciousness. But if you're an initiate, you can go there awake. You can cross the threshold in a waking consciousness. In other words, if you could wake up and be conscious in your dreams, you would be experiencing the realm of the angels. Now, Rudolf Steiner describes this realm, and just the descriptions alone can kind of leave you far behind in the dust trying to keep up with it. But he says that the whole world is made out of images. Everything in the cosmos, it's images. And he describes that those are two-dimensional images, but they're living images, and they're coming from all directions at you into your I am, which is a vessel to catch them or to let them flow through or to enlighten you or to give you nourishment, as the ambrosia, as John just talked about, the soma, the dew of heaven. There's 1,000 names for it. But once you have this and you experience this, then you realize that the forces that create those images, for instance, just before you go to sleep, if you watch very carefully and try to stay awake as you're falling asleep, you'll see images. You could call them raying at you, beaming at you from all directions, like from the whole sphere around you, beaming at you. Those are actually living beings who are donating their two-dimensional donation to you to create the images that maintain your physical body, your etheric body, and your astral body. So that's the way that we would see it. And so when you go into dreams, your I am is not active. It has no willpower unless you're an initiate. And so what do you see when you're in dreams? Images after images after images. Do you have to chase them? Well, you can't, because you can't control your whatever you have as your vehicle of motivation, your legs, your arms, your wings, whatever. They just come to you, and anything you think about or you feel, it comes to you, but it comes in images. And so I've been an interpreter of dreams for a long, long time, since I was a child, because they always seemed quite evident to me what was going on. And I will explain to you the most common dream that people have. The most common dream is that you start off from your home and you go somewhere and you're doing something usually with other people. And oftentimes it will take the images of your previous jobs, your work, your school, your college, your high school, your family, and you're working and you're working and you're working. And you had left a place, your home, and you came there in a vehicle. And now you're doing all this work. And then what happens? You finish up the work and it seems like it's time to go and you look for your vehicle and you can't find it, no matter where you look. Where you can't figure out where you parked your car, where you catch the bus, where's your bike, whatever. And so in most cases, the majority of cases, one of a few things happen. If you're an initiate, you just start flying home. Very simple. You sprout your wings and you fly home. For most people, no, they get all worried and they freak out and then they start to walk home. And then they have to walk through a terrible, awful, dark industrial district. It's terrifying. And then they have to walk through, all these past memories of how you felt bad about things you've done. And then you have to go through all these other images. You don't know what they mean, and you never get home.
I like the one where you're walking and it's like you're walking in quicksand. It's like How come I can't go faster?
And this is, what is this? This is who you are. This is who all of us are. We came from heaven. We remember it. We came in a vehicle from our pre-birth condition. The vehicle was created for us, and whether we know it or not, we were given a preview of what your life is going to be down here with those particular parents. That's why you chose those parents. So children actually choose their destiny, and we can help them along, but they've chosen their destiny. And so you get to the place where you got your vehicle, you go to where you're supposed to do your work. What is that? That's human evolution. And the reason it looks like your work or your school is because that's where you left some unresolved things. Because you can't get to heaven, you can't get back to heaven where you came from unless you resolve all those things. So whatever the problem is, and the problem then can turn into something sexual. It doesn't usually can turn into something violent, because normally in a dream you are watching it. You don't feel you're creating it, and you don't feel you have control over it. So what is it doing? It's replaying your path back to where you came from. And so what happens if you are a resolved being and you're an initiate and you can reach into the realm of moral imagination, the realm of the angels, you can hear their language and speak with them? Great. You can go beyond that. And what will happen is you'll learn to fly in your dreams anywhere you want. You'll learn to see it in color. You'll learn to interact with it. You will be able to look down and see that you have hands and feet, and that you can control what those hands and feet do, because that's all about controlling your astral body. What you're describing is your control of your physical, etheric, and astral body. And so when people tell me these dreams, and they're all these elaborate dreams, basically it comes down to me saying, you're the prodigal son, you're the prodigal daughter, and it's okay. And you'll find your vehicle, but you have to take the time to develop that vehicle. And if you do not, you'll get in the vehicle and it won't start. You won't remember how to make it work, and it won't go. And what will you have to do? Get out and walk home. And by the way, the walk back is a very, very long way. You really want some help from either some angel wings or from a consciousness that can defy time and space, so that you can get back to your home. But in most cases, if they got back to their home, then you're dealing with someone who's already done the preparation and has been enlightened. And now they enter into initiation. So in your dreams, where your three higher egos do exist, you might reach the second realm, where it's not just images, but it's beautiful sounds, music, where you see New Jerusalem descending. And what always accompanies the images of the apocalypse, as St. John goes higher and higher into the heavens, is the sound of trumpets, the sound of rushing wind, the sound of angelic hosts singing together, the eternal song. It's referenced in the book of Revelation by St. John. Or you then are in the realm of life spirit. You're in your second higher ego that's in the spiritual world. And so you start to listen to all of this stuff. And the analogy is, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's not an analogy. In the first level, you get your wings. In the second level, you pick up an instrument that you play in the symphony of the angelic hosts. But only in the third realm. And seldom does anyone get there. But if they do, then they have the experience of the word. This is the light ether, sound ether, and now the word ether, or the life ether, in that third realm will begin to speak to you. And you will have already learned through the images and through the sounds what the alphabet is, and you can start to put together the words, and then pretty soon the spirit speaks to you in your dreams. And that can happen while you're awake, while you're in meditation, while you're in prayer. You hear a voice. And when you hear this voice, it's universal, that it gives you courage, that it instills love in your heart, and that it instills an insatiable desire to return to the earth to help other human beings understand the concepts and the meaning of these words. And you begin to preach the eternal gospel according to the book of Revelation. So that's how you know you've reached the third realm, when it becomes words And those words are true inherently because they're an intuition, just like the sound is an inspiration, just like the images are imagination, moral imagination. When you hear these words, they are literally the cosmic word. And that word is love. And then the things that support it are harmony and the willpower of God, which could be considered to be the truth, the beauty, and the goodness of the universe.
Yes, and to speak out of anthroposophy is different than speaking about anthroposophy, because when you begin to speak out of anthroposophy, it means that the content, the wisdom of anthroposophy has become a part of you. It's been assimilated into your very nature so that it becomes second nature for you to be able to use the characterizations and concepts of anthroposophy to be able to uh, think and create imaginative pictures regarding the substance of your heart thought. And in taking this heart thought and making that an offering to the world as a offering of redemption to the world, that is the essence of what the gospels are referencing. So, well, I mean, what does the word gospel mean? It means good news. They've gone out to the world, and they're going out and they're spreading the good news. And you have that carrying forward primarily into Europe and North Africa and in the areas of the Middle East, that you have that dispensation coming out. And there's interesting time frames in which certain events take place. One interesting time frame is back in like the late fourth century with Ulfilas. You know, he was this fourth century preacher of the Gothic people, but he was a Cappadocian Greek, and who his parents were in slavery, and he was born into that realm, and it was he was located in the region around the Danube up in Europe, but yet he was of Greek descent. But he was raised as a Christian, and he ended up becoming the one who converted the Goths. And the way in which he could do that, of course, was to be able to develop that Christ force within his being to be able to convince the beings, specifically the initiates of the pagan cults, that he was the real thing. And he ended up being in charge of creating the Gothic Bible, which was the first European Bible in creating the Gothic language to write it in. And when he created the word for the I am, or the I, the ego, he called it, and it's not, the word carries forward in German, it's Ich, ICH. And that's the initials of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And these kind of, and he had a direct experience of Christ. And so after Christ lived on the earth, he didn't leave. He said he'd be here till the end of time. And he's now in the etheric realm in a new form of resurrection that can be experienced by people who are on the path of initiation. They could become enlightened like Buddha and reach the realm of nirvana, and they would, at that point, it would be impossible in the higher ranks of the angels, archangels, archai, the spirits of form, of movement, of wisdom, of willpower, of harmony and love. All of them witness Christ's deed, because Christ is the only being who has gone through all ranks from heaven to earth, even into the human realm and even into the realms and subearthly realms after death, and then risen. And now his resurrection body is taking the rest of us up with him as he's moving forward. So in the East, they have a thing called deity worship, Well, if Christ is a deity, then we should, and we're worshiping Christ, then we could follow their example. And what is their example from the past? First, they visualize the deity in every single aspect that you can. And that's kind of hard to do with Christ unless you have a really great cosmology like Steiner's that has Christ at the center of it. But we wrote a book, John helped me write a book years ago called Goddess Meditations. And it was 365 wisdom poems for people to visualize, invoke, and embody the great goddess, who is also threefold: Mother, Daughter, and Holy Sophia. And so that is what you can do. You may think that these things are out of your reach, and you may think you haven't reached enlightenment. But if you can look at your processes of thinking about thinking, if you can begin to understand what I was describing as these images, two-dimensional images that are raying in from all directions, from a sphere, from all the stars into you to create your physical body, then that is somewhat of a beginning stage for the type of visualization you need to reach into the realm of the angels. But as you're doing deity worship, you do visualization. So you think every single detail you can about Christ, whether it be the Stations of the Cross, whether it, the glory, you want to do the rosary and the Stations of the Cross and the different ways to do the rosary with the path of suffering, the path of resurrection, the path of victory. You can do 1,000 different ways to do this, but first you must learn to concentrate. If you can't concentrate, you cannot meditate. So you concentrate first, and then you meditate on a visualization of the deity that you wish to become. And in this case, for us Christians, it's Christ. And then you invoke that being. In other words, you say, not I, but Christ in me. There is a thing called the eternal prayer. If you say, not I, but Christ in me, over and over and over, all your waking day, pretty soon it becomes a habit that every time you respond to anything, it won't be you who's responding. It will be not you, but Christ in you. And so you invoke it, whether you're saying a prayer, whether you're singing a song, whether you're reciting poetry, whether you're doing the Rudolf Steiner Foundation meditation with its cycles and rhythms of the week, whether you're doing his calendar of the soul, which is a interaction with the nature forces and the seasons, whether you're taking a meditation of his, but you invoke it. You invoke the being that you wish to become. So you invoke something that refers to Christ. And eventually, once you do that, it's like a meditation. That's why you say, Om Mani Padme Hum, hail thou jewel in the heart of the lotus. That jewel in the heart of the lotus is in your heart, and the wish-fulfilling stone is that jewel. It's also the stone that fell from Lucifer's crown, and it's that pride and ego that can lead you into Luciferic demonic realms on the left side, and on the right side, it can lead you into the darkness of subnature through Ahriman. And so you say, Om Mani Padme Hum, hail thou jewel in the heart of the lotus. In other words, hail thou Buddha, you have reached nirvana, you've reached moral imagination, you've reached the spirit self. I wish to become like you. And so there's all of the prayers in Tibetan Buddhism actually are based upon this. And then you embody it. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, they do that through a ritual and empowerment. They do it through long meditations, repetitive meditations, the different yogas of breath, of the body, of the fire, of water, of earth. You can do it 1,000 ways, but what you're trying to do is say, I understand the power of Christ through the universe, which is the power of love. And he is the only being that we know that we can contact. You can't really contact the Father God unless, if you did, you would burn up, according to Rudolf Steiner. If you could understand for 1 minute the forces behind your physical body, you would simply burn up, because you wouldn't be able to handle it. So if you're looking at Christ, he understands everything from heaven, from the Trinity, all the way to hell, all the way through the 9 hierarchies. Everything that humans have experienced, Christ has experienced. And now he's rising back up through his resurrection, and he's taking us with him. So if you wish to become like that and go through the way, or vita dolorosa, or the way of suffering, or you wish to become a soldier of Christ, or you wish to become somebody who is active in your will, then you try to become like him in the imitation of Christ, as they would call it back in the old days. You try to imitate Christ's actions, which are selfless and loving. And you follow his only rule: love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. That's all you have to do. But that's the hardest thing to do, to get yourself out of the way on a major scale. Then you visualize, you invoke, and you embody, and that becomes deity worship that actually becomes deity lifestyle. And in Tibetan Buddhism, they call it the 13 yogas, that you begin to bring Christ into your thinking, Christ into your feeling, Christ into your actions, Christ into your equilibrium of your heart, Christ into your memory. So you begin to say that you're going to conquer every single part of yourself, not just your astral body and the Luciferic angel that wishes to lead you into desire, not just your etheric body, which can lull you into the sleep of the harmony of the spheres, where you could get caught there for 1,000 years. No, this is much tougher. This is going all the way into your physical body and redeeming it through deity worship by doing what Christ did. And what did he do with his physical body, his body and blood? He sacrificed it for all of humanity. So when you reach that level, you'll find that it's easier to talk about these things than it is to do it.
Yes, it's the alchemical transformation whereby through this crucible of existence that you literally bring about a transformation of your vehicles. And it's typified in many ways, but one way in which you can look at this is that is central to our task is that it's the transformation of the carbon where through going through all of this testing, ultimately the carbon resolves itself into a shining fluid diamond. And that is the phantom physical. That is the resurrection body. And of course, that's something that's to be treated with a great deal of reverence and respect because you're looking at your future there. As long as you don't fall out of the boat, right? Because remember that you've been given the opportunity to be a human being. You've been donated divine substance to be your I am. But you can choose to negate this I am through the pursuit of falsehood and self gratification and all the seven deadly sins and all that kind of meandering through this whole miasm of reality. And then you can end up becoming an idea, that never achieved fulfillment. And that's a place where you don't want to find out firsthand what that's about, right? That's not the fun way. Ironically, the fun way is to take up the task and pursue your path despite of the suffering. And furthermore, this suffering isn't for you to receive your transformation, but it's because you're pursuing it for the sake of others that you will receive this transmutation. And that's the hard thing to grasp. And Rudolf Steiner has described it as the burning of the golden calf, and that you visualize Moses, and he's has you take the calf, and then you chop it up, grind it up, burn it up, and then put it in pure water and drink it. That it's that taking that sheath nature and making it go back and dissipate. And then what remains after you've taken the love of all this sheath nature, the love of the fact that you have a physical body, the love of the fact that you have an etheric body, the love of the fact that you have an astral body, and oh, you're so pretty, and oh, you have such fine things, and that's all well and good, but not if it's a trap.
The etherization of the blood you were just making reference to can be found in Dr. Tyler Gabriel's books, the trilogy called The Gospel of Sophia. The first one is about moral development, and it's about, first off, finding your relationship to what could be called the group soul of humanity in the zodiac, in the 12 different labors of the goddess, of Psyche, really, or of Hercules, who is really the hero of Hera. They've turned it around. But anyway, as you are become a solar hero, you see all 12 aspects of the 12 different signs, and you become all of them at once, which is rather a difficult task. But that is the path that you need to take to become enlightened. And then once you're enlightened, you can start an initiation, and you can consciously do what John was just making reference to, which is in book 2 of Gospel of Sophia by Dr. Tyler Gabriel. And what you can do is, if you need a mental scaffolding or a platform or foundation on which to build, you can actually describe these things in physical terms. Now, Rudolf Steiner would tell us, and has told us, that the ego can be found in the nerve ganglia. And as John pointed out, the center of your sense of your ego and your I am is in your solar plexus, right next to your heart, of course. And the 3 lower chakras below that are supposed to have been already worked on and already conquered in the past. Well, that's not the way it usually turns out in today's world. And then the 3 from the heart to the throat, to the brow, to the crown, that is the path of the future. That's the path of the angel, archangel, archai, and even into the realm of the Elohim. So how does that happen? Well, in the second book, it's described of Gospel of Sophia quite in detail, but it's the same path that you find in all true mystery initiation schools. In other words, the real secrets behind the myths, the real secrets behind the legends, behind the religions. It's about your I am finding its seat in the heart, having conquered your astral body, your etheric body, and your physical body to some degree. And then you can start what's called the frontal spinal column, or the etheric streaming from the heart to the pineal gland, or from the heart chakra to the brow chakra and the crown chakra. So how do you do this? Well, it's described in great detail, and it's in the books that we've put out. But essentially, you take carbon, because carbon is the philosopher's stone. One could even call it the grail. And carbon is this liquid diamond that John just made reference to. Carbon, in its future state, will be able to be liquid, but still have the capacities to be 100% carbon. Why? Because carbon is love. Carbon gives away of itself to anything it comes into contact with and becomes like it. And its valence is an interaction that is selfless. So it gives up of itself. And so carbon, as Steiner had pointed out, the philosopher's stone, like the alchemist said, is everywhere in nature. Well, it's everywhere in organic nature. In inorganic nature, you would find it in silica. We'll talk about that in a minute. But carbon rises up from your chi, from just below your belly button, where there's a fire, and that's this fire of what's called the fierce woman, or the tumo, and it rises up through your channels. Some would call it the kundalini, but the kundalini is your back spinal column, and you don't really want to set that one off without consciousness, because too many people write me and say, I did that and I haven't recovered and I'm still psychotic. What can I do about this? You have to develop the front spinal column. Now, that is when carbon has been cooked, and through your breathing unconsciously, not consciously. You don't want to do the yogas of the past where you use conscious breathing exercises in your meditation or yoga. No, no, no. It has to become a natural process. For instance, if you do the unceasing prayer, the never-ending prayer, not I, but Christ in me, pretty soon that's a breathing that happens that fires the carbon and releases extra carbon that goes up to your heart. And this works through the vagus nerve, in case you're interested in that. And then it goes through the heart, and it goes through the sinoatrial node, or there's a few names for it, but it's a little part in your heart that one of the vagus nerves goes through, and that's that fire John was talking about. That's what literally causes your heart to contract and gives you the warmth in your blood And that is, of course, where you'll find your ego, not only in the nerve ganglia of the chakras, but also in the blood. Steiner says we find the ego. So in your heart, your ego then refines the carbon, mixes it with oxygen in your heart, which is really a liquid. It rises up to nitrogen in your throat, which is expansive, incredibly expansive, and goes out in all directions. It can go as far as your consciousness can go. Then it rises to hydrogen in your brow chakra, and then to sulfur or phosphorus in your crown chakra. And as you transform these, then it deposits calcium carbonate crystals in your pineal gland, which is directly equivalent to your IQ and also your spiritual IQ, because without that, you either turn towards different types of calcium. One represents Lucifer, one represents Ahriman, but the one that's in the middle, calcium carbonate, actually creates little clusters that look like stars, and those then create the capacity for a bioenergetic exchange going through your ventricles of the brain that can then charge your physical brain to basically become the Holy Grail. Rudolf Steiner said the Holy Grail is in your head, and it's the pineal gland sitting on top of the corpus quadragemini, where all 12 nerves come and get synthesized, and then those nerve impulses are fed into your pineal gland. So this is a very exacting process. So we can talk about simple ways: visualize, invoke, embody. We can talk about carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and sulfur, and exactly what you have to do to ionize them to deposit this basically silica. It's silicized. It's basically turning carbon into another substance. And in the human body, we see this because when you're born, you're in utero, you're over 90% silica. By the time you die, you're mostly calcium, and the more calcium you have, the quicker you're going to die. Dying is taking on too much calcium, too much of the male outer manifestation, instead of the spiritual silica manifestation. And that is what creates the inorganic world. But Rudolf Steiner pointed out that your ego is directly proportional to the amount of silica in your blood, the amount of iron in your blood, and the amount of gold in your blood. And this is a mystery that is so inexplicable. Nobody can explain this to you, but homeopathically, what we are doing is we are transforming the sun into gold. But it has to go through the processes of iron, which is what creates the ability for you to take oxygen to every cell in your body, and every selfless blood cell that comes out of your bone marrow and other places as the blood is created. It has no nucleus. It has no I am. Your cells are really the Garden of Paradise. But some of your cells are like Christ. They're selfless. All they do is carry the good and take out the bad. And that's through iron. And then with silica, silica has something to do with the whole mystery of levity, because all the plant world is based upon silica and its ability to rise back up to its home, the sun. Does that sound familiar? So silica helps us stand upright. It gives us our uprightness. And then, of course, the gifts of Christ, uprightness, speaking, and thinking. You could actually say that those are related to these three elements that are found in the blood that have a direct proportion to your ego presence in your body. And everyone has a different ego presence. And they used to believe that the calcium carbonate crystals in your brain, in your pineal gland, called brain sand, determined your ego, and it was fixed for the rest of your life. That's not true. It's now been proven definitively that the smarter you get, I should say wiser you get, not just how much knowledge you can accumulate, but the wiser you get, the more you deposit these calcium carbonates and crystals in your brain. And a psychic can see them. A psychic can walk up, look at your third eye, and look into your pineal gland and say, yeah, you're not working very hard, are you? Or they can look in your heart into that treasure box I mentioned, which is the treasure box of the karma in your heart, and see if these little beautiful pink drops from the two channels of Ida Pingala have merged in Sushumna and deposited these drops which actually go up your spine, go through your brain, and come down, go into your heart, and then go back up again. And then the cycle is started. And that cycle actually creates deposits in your heart. And those, in fact, that's the good karma that you're developing. And they're little pink drops. So in the East, they would say that your I am is as big as your fingernail on your thumb, and it's in your heart. Well, that's the atriosynal node. And then it points to the rainbow that can come out of your third eye. Well, that's the calcium carbonate crystals coming through your third eye chakra. And so you can start to see that what has been taught for literally 10,000 years, 12,000 years, the same things that have been taught are the same things we're dealing with today. And yet we still don't have a handle on them, because this has to be done through moral development. It can't just be that they will take an injection and put it directly into your pineal gland of calcium carbonate crystals. They have to be ones that you yourself created, digested, and brought up through the realms of the mineral, plant, animal, human, into the realm of the angels. And when you plant these crystals in your pineal gland, that is food for the angels. It's food for the archangels. It's food for the archai. So these things have a physical component, but they are all stimulated and created out of the spiritual realm, out of the soul realm, and then have a physical manifestation. But because we're such materialists in the West, people sometimes need to know that these things are very, very real. They have a physical component, but they need to remember to not be spiritual materialists and think that because you can control it physically, you can control it spiritually, because that is up to the I am development of the individual.
Yes, in the esoteric lessons that Rudolf Steiner gave when he was the head of the Theosophical Society in Germany, and he was the head of the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society. And in numerous places throughout there, he shares with the pupils that are present that one can easily bring about a clarification by chanting Om, A-U-M. It's a threefold chant. And it's interesting because that Om, which is visualized many different ways, but it has to be given its due. I remember one time back, again, referring to our being amongst the first people to meet the Dalai Lama when he came to North America in Ann Arbor. And one of the monks, a Gelugpa monk, that was traveling in his company. This guy was very interesting, and he had like this theosophical bump, this ridge running all the way to the back of his head, like that. It was as if like he needed that because he had such a highly developed pineal pituitary process going on. But we're walking down the street, me and a few other friends, and I see him and I nod and I say, Shante. And he goes, Om Shante. I forgot the Om part. See, that's the important part.
Yes, and in the Tibetans, they all have those funny hats, and down in South America, they have them. They come up really tall, and then they curve. That's called the tingly. That is what it looks like when they drop back into the group soul memory to do their spiritual teaching. I would watch them because I was clairvoyant and I could see this. And really, that's the crown chakra, and it's turning into basically an antenna for the spiritual world, and it's drawing in these forces. That it's one of the reasons that you get with a real Lama Rinpoche, like Gaelic Rinpoche, infinite memory capacities. But the second that he goes into chanting one of these incredibly long things that no Westerner could ever memorize, he goes in practically trance, drops back here, and you just see a rainbow come up from the back of his head, and it comes up and it comes over like this. And then you see a rainbow come out of his third eye right at you, and it's beaming this stuff right to you. And then you see his heart open like a giant rainbow, but a round rainbow, and you're going, wow, this is a light show. And then you start to hear things, right? And then pretty soon it's like you imagine that you actually can understand what he's saying. He's speaking in Tibetan, but you know what he's saying. And you think, well, how can that be? Because in the spiritual world, there's only one language. It's the language of the spirit. The Tower of Babel broke us up into all of our personal ego desires, and every geographic area had a new language. But the language of the spirit is universal. And so when you're looking at these people that are great spiritual teachers from old traditions, you'll see that they use the same colors, the same rituals, the same sounds. They actually look at their text. It's the same thing. It all comes from a book called the Prajnaparamita, or the Book of Wisdom, which is, who is that? The being of Sophia is the being of wisdom. And the Prajnaparamita is a woman. And she has where Prajnaparamita is coming out of her heart. And she's speaking it. And then there's a flower in her hand, a patala flower, the sacred flower. It's like even more sacred than the lotus. That's the etheric body. And then her physical body has certain characteristics. So when you're talking about wisdom, you'll find that the traditions, if you look closely, they're so similar, it's ridiculous. And my PhD, second one, was in comparative religions. And all I could find is they all are based upon the golden rule. But the golden rule, the way Christ said it, not just do unto others as you have others do unto you, but to give yourself over to the divine with all three of your aspects, body, soul, and mind, and your ego, and that you love others as you love yourself. And first, you have to love yourself. But if you realize that you are the hieroglyphic monad, you are the microcosm of the macrocosm, you are the small I am trying to copy the large I am, and you don't love yourself, then you didn't think it through very clearly, did you? Because you are a precious, incredible being, unique in the universe, a perfect copy of the universe, and that you are growing into what we look out and see in the cosmos out there, in the universe out there. Every single interaction out there is done out of love. And one thing's for sure, as Steiner pointed out, if we're on the earth and we try to look beyond our solar system, we cannot comprehend it. It is not what we think we are seeing. We are actually looking into the inside of the mind of God. And those images I was talking about, those are thoughts. He says that the entire universe is nothing but thought. And that thought is, of course, the thought of love and the sharing that comes, like when carbon shares of itself to always bond with everything that comes to it. Or like water. When water flows over something, they now know it takes in the memory of whatever it flows over and holds that memory. And water is this absolute magical substance that can receive the light, it can receive the sound, it can receive the life force, and literally has the forms. If it flows over granite, water takes on the nature of granite. If it flows over plants, it takes on the nature of those plants. We are, of course, a column of water. We're an antenna. And so we're trying to tune into being able to visualize and let those images of the angels come in, to hear, let the inspirations of the archangels come in, and then to live the word of God, in other words, to live the divine plan. And when that happens, you are no longer a human, and you no longer have the free will to be able to stand up against God and say, I exist. I love this. This is the most prideful, hubris thing anyone could ever say. I exist, God, and you don't. That is where modern humanity has come. So they're stuck in the intellectual soul age. They can't get to the consciousness soul age and take their ego the next step. And they actually think that they are luciferically God. Yeah, they're a God. They're a luciferic God. And it's just an ego God of the lower realms. It's a lower ego. But when you get to the higher ego, when you say I am, well, you can't say I am because you no longer have an I, because you gave it up selflessly for all others. So we develop from the I am to the world I am, but in so doing, we have to move from selfishness to selflessness. And that is the secret of the development of the three egos.
And so there you have it. That it's a wonderful path whereby you give everything away. And as a result, you receive everything. And so, with that, I want to thank you all for visiting us once again. And please share your reviews or any insights you may have.